Snow had been falling since afternoon, and by night the forest looked as if it had been carved from moonlight and silence. At the very edge of the trees, where the pines grew close enough to keep out most of the wind, a small cottage rested with its back against the dark. Its steep roof wore a thick white blanket. Soft golden light shone from the windows and spilled in narrow paths across the snow. Smoke rose in a thin ribbon from the chimney into the winter sky. Inside lived a witch named Elara. Not the kind told in frightened whispers. Her magic was quiet, like the snow. She listened more than she spoke and knew the names of the trees and the moods of the wind. Tonight was the last night of the year. Elara moved slowly through her cottage, preparing it the way she always did. The large stone fireplace filled the room with warm orange light. Logs burned in a low, steady flame. Above the hearth hung bundles of dried herbs, sage, lavender, rosemary, casting soft shadows on the stone. The rug before the fire was worn but thick. A heavy wooden chair sat close to the hearth, its arms polished by years of use. On the mantel stood jars with powders, leaves, stones, and small, plain objects that weren't plain at all. Like a heart-shaped pebble, a piece of driftwood, and a brass key whose lock was long gone. Against the far wall ticked the old clock. Tall, carved, patient. Its brass pendulum swung with slow certainty. Tick, tock. The face held Roman numerals, the hands black and slender. Sometimes a silver mist curled inside the glass like a breath that never faded. Elara glanced at it. "Not yet," she whispered. She crossed to the small table by the window where an open book lay filled with circular symbols. A white feather quill rested beside vials of dark inks. Candles burned, wax dripping in pale rivers. Outside, the frosted window showed the dark forest divided into 4 sections. Snow clung to the edges in leaf-like shapes. Elara touched the glass. The frost didn't melt. "Everything is ready," she murmured. "You can come when you wish." The snowflakes trembled. Elara returned to the center of the room and arranged what she needed for the turning: 3 carved candles, spiced tea, bread with honey, and a bowl of water from the deepest part of the forest well. Elara sat in her chair, letting the warmth of the fire settle around her as she waited. The old clock continued its patient rhythm, filling the room with a calm, steady pulse. Tick, tock, crackle. The cottage seemed to breathe with her. Then the air shifted. It wasn't the fire. It wasn't the wind. It was the stillness, the way it thickened, the way the shadows stretched longer than they should have. Elara lifted her head and looked toward the darkest corner of the room. A pale mist gathered there, thin at first, curling like smoke. Slowly, it thickened into the shape of a woman. Her form was soft, translucent, and her cloak dragged frost across the floor without sound. Elara nodded gently. "Welcome, Ash Witch." The spirit's expression didn't change, but the flames in the fireplace bowed inward, dimming for a few breaths. Her voice, when she spoke, was quiet as snow on stone. "You keep the cottage well. The year remembers you kindly." Elara accepted the words with a small nod. Praise from the Ash Witch was rare. The spirit's gaze drifted around the room, over the herbs above the hearth, the books on the table, the jars lined neatly on the shelves. Everywhere she looked, strands of memory shimmered faintly in the air. "You have survived another circle," she said. "Do you wish to see it, or shall it rest?" She asked this every year. Some years Elara had said yes, letting memories rise like snowflakes, each one holding joy or loss or something in between. Other years she had refused, leaving the past untouched. This year she took a calm breath. "Show me," she said, "but only the moments that still knock on the door." The ash witch moved to the small clay bowl on the table. Frost formed along its rim, white and delicate. The water darkened as if holding night inside it. Then the surface shifted, shaping visions. Elara saw herself in the witch town long ago, carrying books through crowded snowy streets. She saw lanterns and bustling shops, voices mixing with the clang of bells. She saw herself younger, restless, standing at the edge of the celebrations and looking toward the silent forest path. The image changed. The cottage in the early days. Empty shelves. Too bright firelight. A silence so deep it felt heavy on her skin. She remembered how unsure she had been, how afraid she was of choosing isolation. Another shift. Her first turning night. How clumsy she had been greeting the spirits. How her voice had trembled. How she had feared she might not be worthy. When the final memory faded, the water cleared, leaving only her reflection. "You are kinder to yourself now," the ash witch observed. Elara exhaled softly. "The forest taught me." The spirit gave the smallest nod. Then her form thinned into drifting mist and vanished into the air, leaving only a thread of cold behind. The fire surged back to full warmth, throwing golden light across the floor. Elara rose and walked to the window. With her sleeve, she wiped a small circle into the frost. The forest outside glowed blue beneath the moon. Snow coated every branch. Deep among the trees, she saw a faint moving light, the ash witch walking through the woods, honoring what the year had left behind. "Safe traveling," Elara whispered. The frost reclaimed the window pane. She settled again into her chair, the fire crackling steadily. The clock's hands crawled toward midnight, the silver mist behind the glass swirling with each swing of the pendulum. The next visitor would arrive when the last second of the year dissolved into the first second of the new. Elara folded her hands and waited. The fire had settled into a steady, glowing rhythm when the shift came again, this time not cold but warm, bright, and restless. It brushed against Elara's cheek like a spark leaping from the flame. She opened her eyes before the clock finished its slow swing. The silver mist inside the clock's glass brightened. A soft hum filled the cottage, low at first, then rising in a gentle pulse. The air shimmered above the hearth, bending the light as if a heat wave passed through. Elara placed both hands on the arms of her chair and straightened. "Come, Ember Guide," she whispered. The fire answered before anything else did. Flames stretched taller, gaining color, gold, copper, a hint of blue at the edges. The smoke curled upward in a slow spiral, glowing faintly as if starlight had woven through it. Then a figure stepped out of the fire itself. The spirit of the Ember Guide was shaped from warm light. Her outline flickered gently, like a candle seen through summer air. Where the ash witch had been cold and still, this spirit glowed soft and alive. Her eyes were deep amber, her hair a drifting wave of fire-safe sparks. "Elara," she said, her voice warm enough to melt frost. "It is nearly time." Elara smiled. The Ember Guide was the gentlest of the visitors. "You look brighter than last year." "Because you do," the spirit replied simply. She moved across the room with feather-light steps, pausing beside the hanging herbs and brushing her fingertips through the air beneath them. Wherever she passed, the warmth spread outward in soft ripples, soothing stiff wood and old stone. "You've carried much," the Ember Guide murmured. "Yet you did not break under it." Elara lowered her gaze. "There were moments. There always are. Strength is not the absence of weight, it is the willingness to lift it again." The spirit approached the small table where Elara had placed bread, honey, and tea. She touched nothing, yet the tea warmed, the honey glowed, and the bread seemed to soften as if freshly baked. The cottage responded to her presence like a creature waking slowly from sleep. Then the Ember Guide reached toward the clock. Her light reflected in the brass pendulum as it swung, steady and patient. "The moment between years grows thin," she said. "Your heart knows this change better than any spell." Elara glanced toward the window. Outside, snow continued falling silently, blanketing the world in white. Somewhere deep in the woods, the ash witch's cold light flickered. But here, in the cottage, the warmth held firm. "What must I do?" Elara asked. "Only breathe. Only listen." The Ember Guide moved behind Elara's chair and gently placed a warm, shimmering hand on her shoulder. A pulse of heat flowed through Elara's body, comforting, steadying. Not burning, not consuming, only reminding her that she still lived, that she still loved, that she still belonged somewhere. "You are not alone in this turning," the spirit whispered. "The new year carries your name already. It will meet you softly." Elara closed her eyes, letting the warmth sink deep into her bones. The cottage felt almost alive, timbers humming, fire whispering, the clock pulsing with silver light. "You will see the third visitor soon," the Ember Guide said. "And when you do, stand tall." Her form grew thinner, her glow fading slowly into sparks. The fire calmed with her departure, settling back into its natural rhythm. She smiled once more at Elara, gentle, reassuring, then dissolved into warm light that drifted back into the hearth. The cottage dimmed. The warmth remained. Elara opened her eyes. The clock hands were closer to midnight now, trembling at the edge of the hour. The silver mist inside swirled faster, a soft glow building behind the glass. The second visitor had come and gone. Only one remained. Elara placed her hands in her lap and waited for the moment the world would hold its breath. Midnight approached with a stillness so complete that even the fire seemed to hesitate. The second hand of the old clock trembled at the edge of the hour, the silver mist inside the glass swirling faster, as though preparing to open a door only time could see. Elara felt the shift before she heard it. The air didn't grow warm or cold. It grew wide. Not emptier, wider. As if the walls of the cottage stepped back without moving, as if the roof lifted without rising, as if space itself stretched to make room for something vast and unseen. Elara straightened in her chair. Her pulse matched the slow, heavy tick of the clock. Tick. Tock. Then, silence. The pendulum froze mid-swing. The fire held its flame still, unmoving. A snowflake that had landed on the outer side of the windowpane stopped halfway in its melt. Time paused. And in that impossible stillness, the final visitor arrived. At first there was no form at all, only an outline, a ripple in the air like a mirage. Then the ripple grew into a shape, tall and human but made of soft light rather than flesh or shadow. No face. No features. No edges. Only presence. The Gate Witch. Elara stood. Not by force, by instinct. Her knees did not shake. Her breath did not falter. She had met this visitor many times, but never without reverence. "Welcome," she said softly. The presence shifted, acknowledging her. It did not speak with a voice. Instead, its words formed inside Alara's chest like a thought she had always carried. "I am the path." Elara exhaled. "And I am ready." The gate witch drifted closer. With each step, the cottage changed, not physically but in perception. Shadows softened. Colors deepened. The fire glowed without moving. Even the air tasted different, as if filled with the promise of something not yet born. The spirit extended a formless hand. Elara did not take it. She didn't need to. Images unfurled behind her eyes. Not memories, those belonged to the Ash Witch. Not warmth or comfort, those belonged to the Ember Guide. These were possibilities. She saw paths branching out like roots beneath snow. Some led toward joy. Some toward struggle. Some toward quiet days filled with tea and herbs and slow mornings by the fire. Some toward nights when the forest called her beyond the lamplight. Some toward visitors she had not yet met, witches, spirits, creatures carried by winter winds. Some toward solitude. Some toward connection. None were fixed. All were possible. The gate witch's presence pulsed softly. "Choose nothing now." Elara nodded. She understood. The new year was not a prediction. It was a door. The threshold did not require an oath, only willingness. The spirit turned toward the old clock. Time still held its breath. Midnight was frozen at the edge of becoming. Elara followed the presence with her eyes. "What will it cost me?" she asked quietly. The answer formed inside her like warmth blooming in winter soil. "Only courage." The gate witch drifted backward, moving toward the hearth. Its light thinned but brightened at the same time, contracting into a single shimmering thread that stretched across the room. It touched the clock. It touched the fire. It touched Elara's chest. Then everything released at once. The pendulum swung. The fire crackled. The snow melted its frozen teardrop on the window. The clock struck 12. One clear chime. Then another. Then a third. Midnight. The gate witch's presence dissolved into quiet light that faded into the wooden beams, the stones, the floor. Not gone, woven into the fabric of the moment. Elara stood in the center of the room, breathing deeply. The cottage felt normal again, yet not the same. The air had new edges. The fire had new warmth. Even her own heartbeat felt like a steady drum guiding her forward. She returned to her chair slowly and sat down. Outside, the snow fell softly, endlessly. Inside, the year had begun. And Elara, witch of the turning night, felt the gentle truth settle within her. She did not need to know the future. She only needed to take the next step. The echoes of midnight faded slowly, as if the cottage itself needed time to accept that the year had turned. The clock settled into its steady rhythm once more, the pendulum swinging with renewed certainty, no longer hesitant. Tick. Tock. Elara remained seated, her hands resting lightly on the arms of the chair. She did not rush to move. The first hour of the new year was not meant for action. It was meant for listening. The fire had changed. Not brighter, not hotter, deeper. Its glow carried a quiet confidence, as though it knew it would last through whatever the coming year demanded of it. Elara watched the flames curl and lean, memorizing their shape the way one memorizes a face before a long journey. Outside, the snow continued to fall, steady and patient. The forest did not celebrate. It did not mark the hour with sound or color. It accepted the turning the way it accepted everything else, by continuing to breathe. Elara stood at last and crossed the room, her steps slow on the stone floor. She moved to the table by the hearth, where the 3 candles waited. One had burned low during the Ash Witch's visit. One glowed warmly from the presence of the hearth guide. The 3rd stood untouched. She took a breath and lit it. The flame rose clean and pale, casting a softer light than the others. This candle was not for memory, not for comfort. It was for what had not yet arrived. For the year that walks toward me, Elara murmured. The candle answered with silence. She carried the flame to the window and set it on the sill. Its reflection doubled in the glass, creating the illusion of 2 fires guarding the edge between inside and out. Beyond the frost, the forest shifted slightly, branches sighing under the weight of snow. Something moved among the trees. Not a spirit. Not a threat. A deer stepped into view, its coat dark against the pale ground, breath rising in slow clouds. It lifted its head, ears alert, and looked directly at the window. At Elara. They regarded each other for a long moment. Then the deer lowered its head, turned, and vanished quietly into the trees. Elara smiled. "The forest accepts the year," she whispered. She returned to the hearth and added a single log to the fire, not because it needed it, but because the ritual mattered. The wood caught slowly, sparks lifting like tiny stars before fading into the air. From a hook beside the mantel, Elara took down the small brass bell. She held it for a moment, feeling its familiar weight. She rang it once. The sound was low and clear, spreading through the cottage, slipping between the beams, threading itself into the walls. It was not a call. It was a greeting. "To whatever may come," Elara said softly. The bell fell silent. The cottage answered in its own way, wood settling, fire humming, the faint whisper of snow against stone. No new presence arrived. None was meant to. Elara returned to her chair and sat, drawing her cloak around her shoulders. The night stretched ahead, wide and unwritten. For the first time, she felt no urgency to fill it. The year had begun. And it had begun quietly. Morning arrived without ceremony. No sudden light. No sharp sound. Only a gradual thinning of the dark, as if the night loosened its grip one careful finger at a time. The fire had burned low, reduced to glowing embers that breathed softly in the hearth. Elara woke in her chair. Not startled. Not rushed. Her eyes opened slowly, meeting the gentle grey-blue light that now filled the cottage. The clock continued its patient ticking. Tick. Tock. A rhythm unchanged by the turning of the year. She straightened, joints stiff but familiar, and drew a deep breath. The air smelled different, cleaner, lighter. Snow and ash. Cold stone and warm wood. The scent of something beginning. Outside the window, the forest had transformed. Snow lay smooth and untouched, as if the night had carefully erased every footprint and mark. Branches bowed under white weight, glittering faintly where pale morning light found them. The world looked newly made, not because it was new, but because it had rested. Elara rose and moved to the window. She traced a clear circle in the frost and looked out. No spirits lingered. No signs marked their passing. Only the quiet truth of morning. "That is how it should be," she murmured. She set water to warm and prepared her tea with slow care. No spells. No symbols. Just leaves, heat, patience. The kettle sang softly, and she poured, watching steam rise and vanish. She carried the cup to the hearth and knelt, placing her palm flat against the stone. It was warm, steady, alive. "Thank you," she said, not to the fire alone, but to the night that had held her. Outside, a bird called once. Then again. The sound felt like a stitch pulling the world gently forward. Elara wrapped her cloak around herself and opened the door. Cold air rushed in, not harsh, not cruel. Honest. Snow crunched beneath her boots as she stepped onto the stone path. The forest greeted her in silence, tall and watchful. She did not ask the year for anything. She simply stood breathing, letting the morning settle into her bones. Behind her, the cottage waited, unchanged, patient, ready. Ahead of her, the path lay open. The new year had begun. And for now, that was enough. Sleep now, wrapped in warmth and silence, while the forest keeps watch and the new year waits patiently beyond the dawn.